What's going on, guys? Justin with the Podcast Dojo. So today on a Could It Go Away video, we're going to be talking about a more specific location. So for this one, we're going to be talking about South Park Mall in Colonial Heights, Virginia. I know there's a couple of South Park malls throughout the country. I think the most well-known one is in North Carolina, but I'm going to be talking about the one in Colonial Heights, Virginia. So everyone who kind of grew up in the mall era always had their childhood mall, and that one for me was always South Park Mall in Colonial Heights. So do I think this mall could go away? Yes, I definitely think it has all the makings of being a dead mall. But and I'll talk about that, but do I think it ever will die? No. And there's three factors I think why. Now, why do I think it could die? Well, I will say that I think the mall has had kind of a reputation for just having some kind of hoodlum type characters hanging out there. No, I will say that I still go to that mall. I don't ever feel safe, I don't ever feel unsafe going there, because I feel like they have a decent amount of police officers around and mall security. But nothing crazy and outlandish has happened there like what happened at Cloverleaf Mall. But yeah, I definitely think that is a factor, is the type of people that have been showing up there. But at the same time, one of those factors that is keeping it alive is the type of people that are showing up. And I'm definitely, of course, not talking about the unsavory characters. I'm talking about the military. You have Fort Lee nearby, and I always see a lot of the soldiers in there. I see a lot of the stores giving out military discounts, so all the more reason for them to shop there. And unless Fort Lee goes away, which I don't see why they would, especially since they've been around, they reactivated that base during World War II, so I think after all this time, I don't think it's going away anytime soon, or ever. Another factor is VSU, Virginia State University. That is nearby, and a lot of them tend to go there. In fact, the few times I've done Lyft around Petersburg Colonial Heights, I end up taking a VSU student to the mall, whether it's to shop or whether they're going to work. So I think as long as VSU and Fort Lee are there, I don't think this mall is going anywhere. Really, I think the only thing that could really overshadow that and possibly end it is if a major crime happened, like I said, at Cloverleaf Mall. But I think after all of this time, and none of that's happened, I would say the police and security have pretty much stayed on top of it to make sure it doesn't go that route. Now, what is the third factor I think is keeping the mall alive? I'm going to have to say the movie theater. And I say that because it's the closest movie theater for miles. Unless there's another movie theater I don't know about, the closest ones I know about are all the way in Midlothian or all the way up in Richmond. And I know me personally, unless it's a specific showing or I'm meeting up with some friends in another area, if it's just me going to the movies, I don't want to drive all the way up to Richmond or Midlothian just to see the same movie I'm going to get in that about 6 minutes away. So I think that is definitely I think those are the things that are keeping it alive. I think it's got a lot of things working in its favor. Now, if it didn't have either of those, oh yeah, this mall would have probably died in, I would wager, probably the late 90s, early 2000s. So I want to give kind of a little bit of a brief history for this mall. So, of course, mall opened in 1989. Now, I moved from Northern Virginia to the Chester area in 91. Now, yeah, I was pretty young then, but I always remember that. I remember that mall in its infant stages. And I remember always going there every Saturday with my family. And that place was jamming with families. And, it was... I still always thought that other malls like Chesterfield Town Center were better just because they had a wider variety, but it was a nice mall to go to on the weekends. I think when I really started to notice it going downhill was the late 90s, when you had what they call the dot-com boom. And for those of you that don't know, that is when sites like eBay and Amazon really started to come into play. And I think once that happened, I think a lot of people weren't going to the mall as much. Another thing in this mall I still feel has this problem, but not quite as bad as they did from the late 90s to the late 2000s, where they have too many of the same type of store. Like, something that always kind of drove me nuts about that mall was the fact there's so many jewelry stores and so many shoe stores. I was at the mall not too long ago with my fiance, and I think we counted at least 7 jewelry stores. And that's not even counting the jewelry departments inside the department stores like Macy's and JCPenney's. So, I think you got too many of the same type of store. I think that's definitely a factor for them that's kind of keeping people away. Now, as far as the factor that I think, the thing that made me decide to finally say, hey, let's go ahead and do this video, Sears had announced that they were going to be closing by January. Their auto shop was going to be closed in December, and then the store itself is going to be closing in January. In fact, yesterday was the first time I saw their store closing sale. I actually have a picture of it right here that I took. Now, Sears, I don't really think that's the mall's fault so much, because Sears, a Regency Mall in Richmond, Virginia, closed recently, and that was a much busier, bigger mall. I just think Sears as a brand is going on. In fact, one of my friends out in Hawaii told me that the Sears in Ala Moana is closing. Now, for those of you that have never been to Hawaii, Ala Moana is a pretty big touristy area. Like, it's around a lot of the touristy spots. It's in Honolulu. And I've been to that mall in Ala Moana, and oh my god, that is probably the busiest mall I've ever been inside. Like, you know, I thought I thought other malls were big in the 90s. No, like, you could hardly move in this mall, like, when I've been in there. You know, like, on the weekends, yeah, that place is booming. So if their Sears can't even survive out there, that really tells you something about the store brand. Anyway, I don't want to get off topic here. So, the point I'm getting at here is, I've noticed a lot of times in shopping malls that when the anchor stores start leaving, you know, it usually does not spell good for the mall, because it can really steer away potential store, like people who want to put a store in the mall. And it can just kind of give the impression that the mall's not doing well and people don't want to go. Now, something I have noticed about, to be fair to South Park Mall, is that I have noticed that even when they do lose an anchor, they usually don't stay empty very long. Like when the Dillard's closed, I mean, in like no time at all, they started building the Dick's Sporting Goods store. And even where, well, the Dillard's isn't there anymore, but I remember that was Leggett, and then in like no time at all, it was Belk. So, yeah, that mall has never had a problem getting new anchor stores in there. So, I think as long as that doesn't stay empty for too long, I think it'll be okay. Now, if you want my personal opinion, what I think they should put in there, I think they should put a Sushi King in there. That place really needs a sit-down restaurant, I think, and I bet Sushi King would be a hit if they put it in there. Now, something else that also really told me that this mall was not what it used to be, something I always remember, and I'm really sad I could not find any pictures or videos of this, but when the mall first opened, it had 3 really big fountains. There was one in the food court area, there was one in front of Penny's, and there was one in front of Sears. And they were really nice fountains too. And I think probably sometime in the late 90s, they probably started going one by one. Now, something I've also noticed upon going to malls is that when the mall is not getting the foot traffic it once had, fountains will either be shut down or removed completely. Also, the they used to have like trees planted in the mall, and those disappeared. I don't remember when those disappeared. They didn't stand out to me, I guess, quite as much as the fountains did, but I guess that was probably around the same time the fountains did. Now, I think they were smart by removing them when they couldn't afford them, because I don't think it would have looked as attractive to just leave them there. And yeah, so I just think this mall does not have the foot traffic to keep up with the, the maintenance those things require. So, do I think this, I know I've kind of rambled here a little bit, but, so ultimately, do I think this mall could die? Like I said, yeah, it has all the makings of a dead mall, but do I think it ever will? No. Because, like I said, you've got so many factors working in its favor. Do I want it to die? Absolutely not. This is my childhood mall. I don't want to watch something from my childhood go away. So, anyway, is anyone else familiar with this mall? And if so, do you agree with my statements? Do you disagree with them? What if you do shop at that mall regularly? What would you like to see in place of the Sears? Comment below, and I will catch you guys next time.